What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. For those of you who have tuned in before, you already know the mission of this podcast, whether a solo episode or bringing on amazing guests, is to inspire you, educate you, shine some light on experiences that will help you move that dial towards becoming the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you. So today, I have a fellow podcast host with a background as a trial lawyer. He sat down with many people in the health and wellness space, self-development space, and he's put out a lot of his own solo content, just giving a lot of tips, systems, experiences that he's had. So without further ado, John Cohen, appreciate you taking the time.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate it. And please, Jonathan, my mother will have a conniption.
Jonathan, Mrs. Cohen, I apologize. So we'll jump right in. When talking about productivity in a recent video you sent out, you emphasized the importance of identifying or clarifying core values and motivators. What are a few, just as someone who's in the space, what are a few of your core values and motivators?
Oh, wow. I love this question. I appreciate you doing the research, watching the video, and asking. My core values, and I talk about this at a high level. Values are like a roadmap. When you know what you stand for, you can add value to anyone or anything. But understanding what your values are help guide your decision making, because when you know what your values are, you understand how to go about what matters to you. So if you have certain things in your life, or you don't have certain things in your life, it's because of your value system. So some of my values are about integrity, health, wealth, relationships, obviously at a high level, but more specifically, relationships with my family and community are extremely important. And I would also say that at a high level, honesty is extremely important to me. The rest
Why?
comes as a byproduct because when you're honest, you only have to remember one thing, the truth. It's really easy to get caught up in a spiral of lies if you're trying to tell one thing to one person and another thing to another person. But when you tell the truth, it's extremely easy to recall anything because you're only going by one thing, what you said. So for me, integrity, honesty, health, family, those are my values.
Would you bundle integrity and honesty? Because I do think someone who's acting with integrity would be honest consistently. Um, but I also get why you differentiate the two, because honesty is its own thing. But yeah, I do. It's so interesting that those were the pieces you discussed, because recently my self motto has been back to the basics. I've been juggling more balls than usual. And so I wanted to just relay the foundation. And I wrote down what are the things that are the most fundamental pieces that I want to make sure stay sound. And it was health, wealth, relationships, and growth. And I do think baked into growth is integrity, honesty. When did you cultivate those? Was it pretty early on in your process of trying to develop yourself that you realized those were your core tenets, or did they get swapped out with other things over time?
So I think the first question was about the difference between honesty and integrity. So I'll try to take them in order. One is a subsection of the other. You could say that. Integrity at its core is about being whole, it's about being one. And honesty entails an element of being one because you're doing one thing, single source of truth. Integrity, though, as a value and as a core tenet and principle, as you refer to them, is all about alignment. It's about operating in a way that doesn't divert from the things that you believe in. So if you're making a decision about what to eat or what to spend your money on or how to spend your time, you're going to consult your values subconsciously. But having a conscious awareness around what you stand for helps you make more informed decisions about them. So when you ask about the difference between honesty and integrity, it's not, I really am not trying to dissect it. I really try to just hold it as a value in the sense that everything matters. I want to represent myself as being as real as possible. My struggle, my failure. I'm someone who's been rejected time and time and time again, not only from potential podcast guests, but schools and people. And now, obviously, things are very, very different. But all of that stems from a place of not operating with integrity and not being honest. And I guess we'll get into the background at some point, but those are how I would kind of differentiate between the two. And then when did I start to form them? I think again it comes down to alignment. It becomes a point of starting to understand yourself where you realize you need to reassess. This is all about being your best self, right? And if you're not being your best self, that means that you need to change, that there's something compelling you to want to be better, do better, want more. And being out of alignment doesn't allow you to go pursue the great things that you envision for yourself because you're not living up to the things that you know that you could do. So when I started to form them, it was a combination of having these crazy ambitions of, you grow up, I have amazing parents who told me how great I am. And then, the market ultimately validates the greatness, right? And no one really tells you that until you're a bit older. So now I'm 34 and I'm wiser. I definitely have experienced enough of life on both sides of the mic, on the road, in the field, in the courtroom, but there's still a lot more to experience. So I started to form them when I started to realize I'm not getting the things that I want, which means I need to change. And it means I need to reassess. And it means I need to develop more awareness around my life. Now, obviously, I could articulate that now, but at the time, I would say it was more out of necessity for change than anything because I wasn't getting the things that I wanted. And in order to attract the things that I wanted, I needed to shift, and everything else started to fall into place after that.
Yeah, so let's take it back. It sounds like you and I are kindred spirits in the sense that I love this term. I'm not the original author of it, but it's mess to message. So the people who go through a mess in their own life have their own, whether it's insecurities, limiting beliefs, external challenges that the world presents them, and they go through this mess and turn around and see how many other people are going through it as well. And so they package it and deliver it as a message. Take us back to before this, whether it was doing the podcast, being so intentional about just how you operate. And then aside from that, all the charity events you've done, physical challenges you've done. Take us back to the origin of this chapter of your life.
Mm.
What did get the ball rolling? And then kind of just again going back to how did the you now develop from where you started to the man sitting in front of me right now?
I think it's important to note that there's chapters and seasons to life, and you can't do everything all at once. So everything didn't happen all at once. It started with wanting to change my body. And there's an incredible book out there, The Body Keeps the Score. I read it while I was a criminal prosecutor in the Bronx, where I was special victims for 3 years. And I had already kind of achieved the body at that point, and the mindset started to develop as a result. But it all started with changing my body because the more body awareness you have, the more mental awareness you have. So I remember the first time I could feel my abs physically. I was like, oh my God, that muscle was never there before. Like, what's going on? I want more of this. And so eventually, through physical awareness, you start to eat better. You start to notice how you feel when you don't eat as well. And the byproduct of those decisions, same thing with drinking. It was kind of a culture that had been infused into college and certain bad habits that were left over from college and, socially as well. And so through time, it starts with realizing what foods, what things that you put in your body don't make you feel as good. And having that awareness is like, oh, this doesn't make me feel good. That doesn't make me feel good. And then it's about people. That person doesn't make me feel good. This person makes me feel good. And then it's about habits. That habit doesn't make me feel good. This habit starts to make me feel good. And so there's layers to it. And so what happened over time was the more I started to change my body, the more I started to understand my nutrition, the more I started to read, even though as a law student, I was reading voraciously. I wasn't really reading any books. And now you can see on my shelf, like this is just like, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the books that I've read. But there's so much time that I've spent reading, which also was born out of a bad habit where I didn't read. I was someone who just didn't read growing up. And part of it is identifying the behaviors that need to change subconsciously or just kind of calling at you in the back of your mind. You're like, I want to be a reader. I want to be healthy. I want to feel better. I want to look good. I want to wake up early. Like these were just certain voices that were in my head that were calling to me that made me want to do certain things that I wasn't doing. And so I had to cultivate certain habits over time. Now, at 18 years old, I enlisted in the Israeli military, where I spent 2 years as an infantry combat soldier. And then from there, went to college. I had a difficult time getting into college. I had deferred college to enlist in the military, even after I was accepted. I came back and then college, law school, and business school. I did a 4-year JD MBA program. And so at a school called Turo Law out on Long Island. And then the fourth year was in the city. And through those experiences, I had taken a liking to criminal law, except that I didn't really know as a business attorney how I was going to be able to actually pursue criminal law. It didn't really make sense. Maybe white collar crime. I don't know. It's not really for me. But through summer associate positions, I had developed a relationship with a very well known criminal defense attorney who now may rest in peace, Jerry Shargell, who had presided over a mock trial that I was in. He pulled me aside and said, you should go be a criminal prosecutor. This guy represented John Gotti when he was head of the Gambino crime family. So when someone like that pulls you aside and tells you to go give this a shot, you're like, I don't even know if I could get that job. But then it became my North Star for the next couple of years. And so I started to point my compass in that direction, where for the first time in my life, I had really felt like I had an understanding and a mission beyond I want to get fit. This is how I want to be. This is what I want to do. And this will change me. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, but I know it'll put me in a position to go do great things. And so, long story long, the way that I got to this level of self-awareness is through a lot of training, a lot of reading, a lot of practice, a lot of failure, a lot of experience, real world experience. And it's important for anyone to understand, your audience, my audience, that mental toughness is a skill and a skill that's honed through experience and by putting yourself in extremely difficult situations. It's difficult to speak to a victim of domestic violence who's just been stabbed in the throat or who's been abused by her boyfriend, lover, and have to ask them traumatizing questions and get the facts and understand and empathize with them. There's a way to navigate those conversations that I've learned over time that carry over into life. And so those experiences callous you. And again, with the physical training and the life experience, it all kind of takes on a life of its own where this is a long-winded way of saying experience isn't what happens to you, it's what you do with it. And so I've done my best to take my experience and do something with it.
I think a big piece of what you're talking about too is, like you said, and there's that age old quote, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react.
Mm.
That to me is truly one of the biggest keys to a fulfilling life is to live with the antenna up and make sure that you are extracting the lessons from the experiences you're going through. And that's both with the wins and the losses of life, because there are plenty of lessons that come from the upside in terms of what's working, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel at peace, who are the people in your life that light you up, that add to you. And then everything from the flip side, when you lose, when times are rough, objectively, without throwing a pity party, what did you do to get there? Right. And so that is a really powerful statement. Like you said, obviously, the places that you were, there is no denying that you got a heavy dose of a lot of very deep emotions and a lot of very intense interactions based off of just the places you were and the situations you were in. But the fact that you were able to optimize and extract all of that life optimization data, we'll call it, it is such a good reminder to everybody else where, yeah, you may not need to enlist in the army and go work in the SVU, but even if you're at the grocery store, there's probably some lesson to be learned as you walk through the aisles, or hopefully as you listen to this podcast, something pops up, just everything. I do want to talk about the body keeps score because funny enough, that was in my notes. You had that segment where you talked about the 5 books that you really believe to be, at least at this point, the most effective reads. And you made it very clear that you had a favorite on that list, which is The Body Keeps Score. What were a few of your main takeaways from that book that you think are universally applicable? So anyone listening will be able to hear what you say and turn around and see it and use it in their own life.
Fantastic question. Truly appreciate the research. The Body Keeps the Score was a book that was recommended to me by a colleague when I was at the DA's office who was working in the child sex and abuse unit, child sex crimes and abuse units. And when it was recommended to me, I didn't read it at first. And then COVID hit, we had a bit more time, and I was going through this period of my life where I discovered the concept of stoicism, which is a philosophy and a mental operating system that's about stillness and managing your mindset and emotions, which was very eye-opening for me. At the same time, I was getting in like another level of my training where my fitness just really started to take off. I was doing things that I never imagined that I could. And I was tracking it with a product called a Whoop that was giving me real time feedback. I don't use the product anymore, but at the time I did, that was giving me real time feedback into if I lowered my heart rate through breathing through my nose, I understood like, oh, this makes sense. Okay. My heart rate's going down. I feel better. I'm understanding my sleep. I'm understanding calories. I'm understanding, again, the fitness, the mindset. And then at the same time, I'm working with these victims of domestic violence and I'm prosecuting these heinous crimes. And so all this is happening all at once. And I had also hurt my back, where in the process of healing my back, I had discovered nasal breathing through my physical therapist who was teaching me this concept of postural restoration. And after months of being in crazy pain, I started to just breathe through my nose, do these weird positions that he was recommending to me virtually. And my back was healing. And like I said, my fitness took off. And so then I come across this book that I finally had the time to read. And so all these different overlapping layers that I had just mentioned were effectively having my brain fire on all cylinders because the book talks about trauma. And at its core, trauma is not about, or pardon me, trauma is not about the present moment. But Stoicism teaches us that it's all about the present moment. And so trauma is about what was or what could be, and therefore you're not focused on what is. And so because you're not present, you're not focused, and you're thinking about other things, you're not embracing what's in front of you. And so that was one of the first main aspects of understanding, okay, when I'm interviewing a victim, they're thinking about what was or what could be and not focused on what is. So I'm asking them questions to extract facts about what happened in the past. And I have to navigate that conversation in a way that doesn't re traumatize them, but it's inevitable. So, how do you have that conversation effectively? You have to understand chronology, you have to understand sequence of events. And so, one of the main insights that I garnered from the book was also about inner child work. It was about understanding how to speak to your inner child, understanding that a lot of the things that you think, feel, and do are based on things that happened to you when you were a child. Whether you were bullied, how that impacts you now. Whether you had parents that loved you, how that impacts you now. If you have parents that didn't love you, how that impacts you now, or didn't treat you nicely, how that impacts you now. And so understanding the concept of inner child work and trauma started to help me gain a lot of insight into myself because I started to just, as I was going through the book, I was changing. I was just like, my whole life is making so much sense to me now because I'm understanding what it means to navigate conversations empathetically and with sincerity and with presence of mind, stoically, candidly, and also navigating my own self image at the same time. And that concept that I talked about at the top of the episode, where the more body awareness you have, the more mental awareness you have, is also from the body keeps a score. And understanding those three main things that I just outlined are probably the most value driven lessons that have impacted my life because there's real data backed evidentiary content in the book. I'm pointing back here because I believe the book is, yeah, it's right over here. It's right here. And I've just like gone through it so many times. Anytime I pick up this book, I'll go to something I've underlined or starred. And I'm just like, wow, my life. Like it just made, and it always hits different every single time. So this book is a game changer for anyone that, and I'm optimistic to get the author on the podcast at some point. I've reached out to him a couple of times. I'm manifesting it right now, even where if you understand yourself, you can add value to anyone or anything. You can manage your emotions, you can manage your mindset, and those are key tenets, key principles that this book helps you understand, data backed, evidence based, and I can't recommend it enough.
I love it. Yeah, I started the book. I need to finish the book, and seeing that was a good reminder that I need to pick it back up. I want to pivot because it seems like you know the questions I'm about to ask. My next question was going to be about stoicism, and you
Mm.
beat me to the punch yet again. You throw a quick jab, my friend. But so, as it pertains to stoicism, this is something I believe, if not everyone in the world, 99.99% of people in the world need, which is stress management tools. And you talk about when you learned the philosophies and practices with stoicism, that drastically improved your stress levels, just how you manage yourself, your mindset. If you could pick two or three stoic philosophies or practices that you believe are the best just to start people off. So if you're teaching a stoicism 101 class and the focus is implementation, what would those two or three philosophies or practices be just to start people off?
It's a nice, actionable question. The benefit of being a good person is that you get to be a good person. You don't operate with an ulterior motive. You don't do things with expecting someone to do something nice back for you. You do it because it's the right thing to do and it makes you feel good. And if no one ever knew, you'd be better for it. So it's like doing an act of kindness and not telling anybody. I think that's probably the most optimal lesson to start because people do a lot of things with expectation. I'm going to like this photo or podcast swap, or there's always some like ulterior motive in the way that people operate. And if we could just kind of remove that, I think everyone would be better for it. You'll get more out of life that way. So that's one lesson. I mean, Ryan Holiday is pretty much coined or brought back. I don't want to say coined the word, obviously, because we know he didn't, but he's given the philosophy so much life. Tim Ferriss also talks about Stoicism as a mental operating system. So I think that's also probably a very optimal place to, or a frame to approach Stoicism. I'm a Jewish man. Like, I don't look at Stoicism as law, but I see it as a frame and a frame of reference as to what it means to be a good person, how to have another main point, presence of mind, because it's going to teach you how to manage your thoughts and your emotions. And so there's a value in understanding how to manage your thoughts and emotions because if someone tries to trigger you in some way, you then have a set of principles to help guide what it is you're going to do in that reaction. And obviously, a third one is control what you can control. Focus on what you can control. Control the controllables, all variations of control. In training, the best results are about controlling the weight. If you're just doing sloppy reps, you're not going to be able to feel the muscle, mind muscle connection. A lot of people don't understand that, and it's unfortunate because, again, going back to what we were just talking about, the more body awareness you have, the more mental awareness you have. So, Stoicism is a great way to introduce yourself to concepts like what does it mean to be a good person? You're not operating with ulterior motives. How to manage your thoughts and emotions and understand that you're in control of your thoughts and emotions. And so when you do that inner work, which there's always levels to things. If you seek psychological help, if you want to talk to a friend, for me, mine was all about working in the SVU, meeting victims that suffered from terrible, heinous crimes, reading books and training my mind and body and doing really challenging things that forced me to learn about other sides of myself that I'm forever grateful for. So I think those are some key lessons that Stoicism at a high level helps us navigate.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that you don't need recognition to do something good. Recognition feels good, right? But it makes me think of the show Friends,
Mm,
where there's a whole episode where Joey and Phoebe are debating about is there such thing as a truly selfless act? And Joey's argument is no, because anytime you do a selfless act, you feel good about it. So there's a
mm,
selfish component. And I think that isn't to be discredited, right? The biggest reward of doing something good is what you're talking about. It's that lasting feeling of knowing you're doing something good. There was a fascinating study done where they took a massive case study of people and they boiled down all of the responses into four foundational human regrets. So one of them was not taking bold action. So I wish I would have kissed that girl at prom or started that business. One of them is not building a solid foundation, which I think a lot of the things that you've talked about are phenomenal examples of building a solid foundation. One of them is losing touch with people that you care about. And then one of them is simply right versus wrong. So,
mm.
like you talked about, that voice in your head that says, I should go eat the broccoli. And then all of a sudden you have a donut in your mouth. Or I should go to the gym. And all of a sudden you're watching your fifth episode of Netflix. The right versus wrong is a very ingrained battle for a lot of people. But I think also it's that stacking of evidence. So
Mm,
don't start by trying to convince yourself you will always do the right thing. Start by just choosing to do the right thing once. Put that one piece of paper on that stack of positive evidence. But that is a phenomenal reminder. And then the other piece is presence. It amazes me how difficult presence is nowadays for, I mean, myself included. I'm not going to act like I'm, levitating over here while I'm meditating,
same, man.
but
Same.
it is truly amazing how many distractions there are for us. What are a few ways that you make sure that you're where your feet are as you go throughout your day?
Wow. I think that question helps me call myself out, right? Like, is I'm building what I'm building, and things are coming to me from all angles. I'm getting opportunities left and right. There's this immense desire to constantly be plugged in. And I get called out, right? I outlined at the top, family is a value of mine. I'll get called out by my family that I'm on my phone too much, and I'm like, really? Like my screen time's down. Like the data doesn't say that. And some of the things that have worked for me. So even in light of that, I think understanding in that moment, not to take things personally. If someone's telling you that you're on your phone too much, that is absolutely a call to action where don't take it personally that the person is trying to get more time with you by calling you out. Put your phone down and be in the moment because what's there will still be there later. So that's one way. Not taking it personally when someone calls you out and acknowledging that that person wants more of your attention and you should give it to them. I have a 6-month-old daughter. I try to use her smile as a trigger for when I need to put my phone down. When I hear her laugh, I try to use it as a trigger for when to put my phone down. And I'm not perfect. I was the first 3, 4 months because the laugh was more rare. Now she's laughing very often, which is amazing. So it's tougher. But I have to tell myself, as much as I'm building in this opportunity in front of me to interview this person or work with this company or handle this opportunity, that I have to be present with the thing that matters most because there's a finite period of time I get to be with my daughter and my wife throughout the week. And when you have ambition, certain things fall by the wayside and certain things you have to prioritize. And I would say that some of the things that I'm doing are not looking at my phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. That is definitely a core principle of mine. I have wavered from it over the last couple of weeks again because of opportunity, and I've been more like you talked about, more actionable. So if I'm not looking at my phone, I can't take as much action. There's only so long that I can stretch. There's only so long I can mobilize and warm up before I train. Um, there's just this immense call to do things now. And so I'm really trying to lean into that. And that requires me to be on my phone more than I'd like. It also helps me jumpstart my workday, which I've kind of gone out of my way not to do for the first 30 minutes of the day over the last couple of years. But again, when opportunity comes, you have to be ready to seize it. So it's difficult lately to maintain the same presence of mind that I've had over the last few years. But if you're just getting into this and you're trying to maintain a level head, I would say not checking your phone for the first 30 minutes of the day, hearing people when they tell you that they want more of your time to actually listen, and instead of looking at your phone, pick up a book. That
Mm.
definitely, for me, I put my phone in another room sometimes just to start my day with reading or writing. The writing has also been very, very key for me lately. It was for a while when I first started to develop more self-awareness. And if you're trying to develop more self-awareness, then writing is absolutely the number one thing that you can do for yourself. And it's not easy, but get yourself a nice pen, journal, embrace that you're going to write and not make any sense. You could answer prompts, you could write whatever comes to mind, but definitely write. That'll help you develop presence of mind and understand what's on your mind. So those are some of the things that help me stay present.
And Google's a great resource. I mean, for a lot of things, but for journaling prompts in particular, usually I have enough at this point. I'm much more versed in it. So the thoughts come a little more automatically, but there are days where I have no idea how to get started or what to start writing.
Mm,
And just Googling good morning journaling prompts, good start of week or end of week journaling prompts, good journaling prompts for when things are good or when things are bad. Or, I mean, Google is phenomenal when it comes to a lot of things. I do want to
There's
hang
sorry, man,
on.
one or two more things on that actually.
Sure.
Two questions that I usually ask, or one of the questions that I'll usually ask is what's the thing I'm avoiding, or what's the hardest task that I have to do? Those two things absolutely help me align and get myself into a space of getting to work, especially if I'm writing it out. And the other thing that I left about presence that has probably been the strongest catalyst, and I can't believe that I didn't mention it, is nasal breathing. I would
Mhm.
absolutely recommend breathing through your nose as often as possible without looking at your phone. If you want more on that, either spend time Googling it, or I have an awesome episode that I put out on Inside the Inspired with Dr. Dmitry Polyakov, who talks all about it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Send me. Yeah, I'll find the link and put it in the description. So yeah, we'll make sure that's in there. And I'll just have a link to your YouTube channel as well, which quick side note, and I will touch on this again at the end, but Jonathan's content is really next level. It's very quality content. You can tell he puts thought and time into the topics
Thank
he
you, man.
covers, the people he has on. So definitely check it out when you're done with this conversation. But I want to latch on to the word you said a few times, which is trigger. You talk about three habits or three systems just to help out on an everyday basis. One of them is establish triggers. Now, ironically, I feel like the word trigger has itself become a trigger word for a lot of people. But explain what you mean when you say establish triggers, because I think this is really important for people who are trying to reduce activation energy. So, yeah, just touch on what you mean when you say establish triggers.
Well, a big part of it is that triggers, there's this concept of association and disassociation, right? And so when certain things happen to us, we tend to get triggered and associate with a traumatic event, which means that we're going back to the past, right? Like we talked about earlier, or the future, right? Concerned about what could be, and therefore not focused on what is the present. Triggers I've used, like I outlined before, my daughter's smile or her laugh as a way to get present. And so when you look and audit your day to day and you have certain things in your life that allow you to focus your attention, you have to optimize for things as they are, not as you wish they were. And so it takes strength and control and effort, like you said, activation energy in order to do certain things. But if you can optimize your mindset and your heart set into getting to a place where you can simply flow because you're not forcing anything, you're not using that activation energy as you gently put it. Now things can subconsciously come to you. So that example of using my daughter's laugh and smile as a way to get present is a trigger for me. Waking up and not looking at my phone. First second I see my phone, I'm like, I'm not looking at it for the first 30 minutes of that. That's a trigger for me to understand this is a behavior that I'm programming into myself because humans think in patterns. So we can break patterns and we can build patterns, and they take time, but it's very, very doable. Some people call those patterns habits. Some people call those patterns triggers. And so it's all a matter of how you want to look at it. Reframing is an extremely valuable tool and a skill that requires effort, but eventually you can subconsciously program your mindset and, like I said, your heart set into a place where you're optimizing your day and your time so you don't have to fall victim to the things that triggered you once upon a time.
Yeah, what a phenomenal concept. That is something I think in terms of systems. So what can you automate, whether that be habits, whether that be different practices, whatever it is. Like I said, to me, once you can take away that activation energy, so if you're someone who doesn't like getting up early, but you want to get up early and go work out. Well, then the night before, make sure all of your clothes are packed up in your gym bag, which is set on the door with your keys already there. If you know you're someone who will hit the snooze button, put your alarm clock on the opposite side of the room. Just doing little things to reduce that activation energy and establishing those triggers, establishing those habits. Again, fill in whatever word you want to use for it. That's a very powerful tool in that overcoming of the activation energy. I want to take some time because I'm always curious with someone else who gets to talk with so many inspiring people. You've gotten to have a lot of very interesting, very inspiring educational conversations. Of all the conversations you've gotten to have on your podcast, which conversations or topics have felt the most profound to you?
Hmm. Well, right now I'm having some incredible ones that I haven't released yet with some creators and entrepreneurs that have massive audiences in the millions. And so what I've been exploring lately, I haven't been able to share yet. And I've talked about this recently where the greatest advantage that a podcaster has isn't the access that they get to the individual. It's the time that they get between when they have the conversation and publishing because they can listen, they can create so much content from it. And how many times the podcaster goes back and listens and improves on the way that they speak, their cadence, their tonality, their reflection on the information that they've consumed, that is the advantage. So theoretically, if I go back and listen to another podcaster's content multiple times, I'm getting that information cemented into my brain. So it's tough to say of the over 120 plus episodes that I've published, which is the most profound, but the topics that I'm most interested in right now. And I remember speaking to Danny Miranda about this, where also great podcaster who was like, he's into running right now. So he was interviewing a lot of runners. And he's like, one day I'll be a dad. I'm sure I'll interview a lot of dads. Right now, as much as I value and appreciate and will always hold dear the name or title of podcaster, I'm interviewing a lot of creators right now. Some have podcasts, some don't. Some have personal brands, some don't. So, what I'm exploring right now in the conversations that I'm really excited to share, we're getting into live cinematic episodes. I've published two. One was in a studio, the other I've been doing on premises. And the ones that are about to release starting next week, I'm so excited about because they're all about trends around content creation, branding, and building a personal brand and identifying trends ahead of time. What are some of the pillars and variables and catalysts that go into trend setting and understanding where things are going? How people can build, how they maintain their mindset in those moments where they've been doubted, how they maintain their and manage their emotions, right? From a stoic perspective, how they maintain and manage their emotions when things aren't going their way and when things are going their way, right? Never too high, never too low. But it's easier said than done. And so understanding how all these massive creators have garnered and generated their audiences, how they capture and keep attention, it fascinates me because creating great content, the more I study it, the more I understand where things are going. how important it is to share a message. I just put out an episode, I guess, as of this morning with Ryan Alford, also like 20 plus years marketing expert, top 25 marketing business podcast. And he talks about how one day we're all going to be our own TV stations. We already are, right? YouTube. But like, think about what the word means, YouTube. Like, you are the channel. And like, that's crazy to me when you step back, right? So, the topics that matter to me most, I mean, the ethos of the podcast is all about mindset, growth mindset, and high performance, and distilling actionable insights and practical strategies so that people can be inspired to take action. And I've interviewed Holocaust survivors, authors, global best-selling authors. I'm interviewing a professional UFC fighter today. Like, there's just so much that I'm fascinated by. But the main topics I would say have always been about going to the core of the podcast, have been about mindset, managing emotions, compartmentalization, how to stay calm under pressure. Those are the topics that fascinate me the most.
I love it. I have one last question for you. I'll start to wrap it up. As someone who has had well over 100 conversations with different people in the fitness space, health space, mindset space, with where you see, we'll say the average person, whatever that means, the average person at, what is the first piece of advice you would give people in general right now if they asked you the question, what is the first step in me becoming my best self? Where would you have them start?
Self-awareness,
Mm,
100%. Start to develop awareness around your habits, around the way you think. Notice what makes you spiral out into a negative thought loop. Understand that it's a negative thought loop. So then this way you can break free of the negative thought loop. Say you're someone who doesn't like the way they feel, even though they've gone to the gym and you're working on getting that six pack and the scale goes up, but the mirror looks good, or vice versa. The scale goes down, but the mirror doesn't look good. Notice that that's a negative thought loop and you're about to go down that rabbit hole. Identify those moments. The more self awareness you have, the better you can control your thoughts, the better you can control your emotions. So, anyone who's on this path at the very core has to develop awareness. That's the foundation for everything. Step one is all about awareness. You gain clarity around that awareness, and then out of necessity, you take action. Develop awareness around your thoughts, your behaviors, and then you could start to take meaningful action towards building better thoughts, habits, behaviors, rituals through repetition over time. Understand that it's a journey that you'll start and never finish. Take the pressure off, but always work towards it. And that is by far not even a question. Anyone who's asked this question should always start with this answer. I've read, it doesn't matter the number, however impressive it is, enough books to know that awareness is at its key and foundation, the most important thing, hands down, when it comes to this journey. Develop awareness around your everything, and your life can change for the better.
heck yes. I love it, man. Well, Jonathan, thank you for taking the time. Like I said, and I know you know, it is no small thing to take time and hop on someone's podcast and be vulnerable, be transparent. So thank you for your time. Thank you for doing everything that you do. We didn't even really dive too much into it, but I definitely want to chat with you more about the charity events that you do that you attach physical challenges to, because like I said, very, very kindred spirits in that. That's something that's a big passion of mine as well. But
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
Likewise, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to do the research, ask the questions. As a host, I know it's not an easy feat. I know it takes time also for you to carve these things out. If you're a fan of what Trevor's doing, I could definitely say, as a fellow podcaster, go rate, review, and subscribe to the show because it helps it grow.
Heck yeah, you heard it from him. If you liked anything we talked about, click the like button. As always, any questions, comments, agreements, disagreements, love hearing people's thoughts. Go ahead and throw that down in there. I will put links to all the best self happenings in the description, as well as a link to Jonathan's channel. Go check it out. Such good content. And it is not an or game. It's very much me and him and all these other amazing people trying their best to help in whatever way each of us can. He will have many insights that I do not. Please, please, please go check him out. Other than that, if you're not subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't already shared this with 10 people, share it. All the YouTube stuff. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.